Museum, and I'm going to share my screen so that we can get started. I'm so glad you all are here. All right, welcome. So again, welcome to our workshop, I Saw Your Light and It Was Shining, Imaginative Sight in Classroom Storytelling. This workshop will run for about 50 minutes. And if you haven't already, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We have the opportunity to have a Zoom meeting right now. So this will be interactive and we'll get to have conversations with you all. We're excited. And to kick us off, I'm going to introduce you to my colleagues from Cooper Hewitt, Cecilia Vidal.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here today.
And Adriana Birkins.
Hi, everyone. Super excited to be here with you today.
And Cecilia will be supporting us as we go through an activity today, and Adriana will join us later to share some further resources on our discussion today at the end. And of course, we're so lucky to have Oaisa Duvernay with us here today. Oaisa is a New York native artist and mother, and her selected exhibitions and residencies include Women to Watch 2020 at the Aldrich Contemporary Museum, Black Power Wave at Brick, Something to Say at Brooklyn Museum, and The Window and the Breaking of the Window at Studio Museum in Harlem. And of course, the exhibition we'll discuss today, which is John Gray of Ghetto Gastro Selects at Cooper Hewitt. So welcome, Oaisa. So as we get started today, just a quick access check. This program will feature live captioning. You can hit the CC button to receive closed captioning for this event. Please take breaks when you need. And importantly, grab a piece of paper, it can be any piece of paper, and something to write or draw with today, because we're going to be doing an interactive drawing activity. And during this time, we'll work independently, but we will share out as a whole group and have discussions. And finally, this program is being recorded, and we will be in touch when the recording is available. So some goals today, we will be learning new strategies for close looking at objects with our students. And we'll be using objects as a tool for speculative thinking and storytelling in the classroom. So we'll get to talking about what that means and what that will entail soon. But let's just dive in. Before we get started with talking about the exhibition and the objects, I wanted to ask you to join us in some of this thinking. So we're going to be talking a lot about objects and the stories that they hold today. And I wanted to see if we could channel that a little bit. So I'd love for everyone to think about or even find an object nearby that is valuable to you. You could go grab it if you have it handy, or you could just think about it. And I want everyone to think about what makes that object valuable to you. And remember, it does not need to hold any monetary value. But what is it valuable to you for, and how does it make you feel? And if you feel comfortable, please add it in the chat along with a little bit about what it is and why you value it. I'm looking forward to these responses. Cecilia, I know you have an object, right?
I do have an object. This is one of my favorite sort of objects that represent a really important memory to me. And it is a bronze hand. And I purchased it at a flea market in Italy, and it was the first time I had a kind of full conversation in Italian, and it felt like it marked a very important milestone for myself and language and being in a different country. So this is my object that, even though it's just a hand, it is really meaningful to me.
That's amazing. So I've heard also that it represented a special memory, a time where you felt proud of yourself. And even though maybe it's not super maybe monetarily valuable, it's valuable to you. I'm seeing in the chat a giant marble from my late grandfather's marble collection, 2 volumes of Leonardo da Vinci sketchbooks. Hey, amazing.
That's impressive.
It's quite impressive. I can see why that's valuable. And we're going to really keep digging into objects that are valuable to us. And why objects are valuable and how we can tell stories about objects. I'm reading Sarah has an old propelling pencil that belonged to her grandfather, and it opens up and there are 3 tiny dice inside. Oh, wow, it's like a secret hiding within. Love that. Carved figure from, again, another trip to Guatemala. Oh, and Kim with the paper cup reminds you how beautiful and simple design can be. Beautiful. Objects can remind you where they're from. Yeah, Ruki, that's amazing. So I had mentioned that we're going to be thinking a lot about objects and the stories they hold today. And thank you all for sharing those beautiful examples. And, you know, we often hear and see examples of museums telling us why objects are important, right? This is an image of Cooper Hewitt. We wish we could be there today, but we're very grateful that you've joined us virtually. And so sometimes the idea when we walk into a museum, we'll hear about why an object is important or why we should care or exactly what the story is. But we're going to be talking about an exhibition today called John Gray of Ghetto Gastro Selects, which is the 19th installation in our Selects exhibition series. And in Selects exhibitions, we invite designers, artists, and architects to explore and interpret the collection themselves. And John Gray is the co-founder of a creative collective and cooking advocacy group called Ghetto Gastro, and works at the intersection of food, culture, and the Bronx experience. So Cecilia just shared a little bit more, a link where you can find a little bit more out about John and Ghetto Gastro. But I'm going to turn it over to Oesa, who's going to talk a little bit more about the show and sort of what it's inspired and what was made from the objects that were selected.
Hi, everyone. Could I get control of the screen?
I will give that a shot, yes. For now, why don't you go ahead and I'll work on it as you're, but feel free to next slide, the next slide.
Okay, so we can go back.
Oh, of course.
All right, thank you so much. Again, it's so great to be here. My name is Oesa Duvernay and I'm an artist. And I won't repeat Kirsten. she said a lot already. So I'll just talk about my experience making these drawings for the exhibition and the learning lab, which was so amazing. I'm super excited about it and super excited to be here. So at the end of 2019, I was asked by John Gray if I would be interested in making an Afrofuturist graphic novel. And to which I answered, hell yes, right? That sounds amazing. He then said it would be for the exhibition catalog for John Gray Selects at the Cooper Hewitt. And then I responded, okay, I'm gonna need some more information. Next slide. Well, he had me in this story, the Cooper Hewitt would be underwater with most of New York City due to climate disaster. And I was just like, what? That's amazing. What he didn't know at the time was that I used to work at the Cooper Hewitt at their admissions desk many, many years ago. And so the visioning of this was immediate and very personal for me. Next slide. I was filled with excitement upon reading his treatment and outline of the story of a young person rediscovering objects and artifacts through fresh eyes and an untarnished sense of self, because the triumph of colonialism had been washed away and sunk by its own undoing. The main character, Allah, would be dressed in this Dogon mask that we see here and Japanese kimono, not as a costume, but as a ritual for their journey. Next slide. Speaking of journeys, I know I mentioned joining this, mentioned joining this project at the end of 2019, which for most of us at the time seemed like the general humdrum of, you know, your regular old everyday violent capitalism. Trump was the president. So what used to be viewed as a diabolical cocktail of greed and complacency now seem to be made radioactive with idiocy and a lot of bravado, right? Little did we know what the very near future had in store for us. I began working on this exhibition drawings at the beginning of 2020. As I worked through my own personal tragedies in my family, I immersed myself in the life and adventures of Allah. It was a welcome escape from some of the hard realities my family was facing. And that was only January of 2020. But in 2077, Allah and young people like them had survived and been born in the post-disaster. The world had ended and begun anew. You could jet ski through New York City, gliding past both Yankee Stadium and David Adjaye's Sugar Hill building in no particular order, because they have both drifted and buoyed into the unknown. The world had ended, and every day we begin it again, anew and with fresh eyes and new interpretations, unruined by unnecessary hierarchies. This is how I envisioned Allah's perspective for the exhibition drawings. Next slide. By the time I began the drawings for the Learning Lab. Oops, yes. It was June 2020. I was uncurling from the fetal position I've spent most of the last few months in, and was closely watching a swift and massive awakening of white people, to which their ears had finally tuned to hearing voices other than their own. Their understanding of not actually understanding had begun. And in the midst of all the email and text check-ins from former white colleagues and classmates to see how I was doing, a space had opened up. Not just for white people to see and hear what their privilege had refused them for so long, but also for Black and brown folks like me to experience. To be centered in spaces that had never been open to us, not even performatively. So what is it like to look at these objects and know that it's not only the lens that you are viewed through, but that it is the wrong lens, and that you no longer accept being defined by it? Next slide. I witnessed this happening with my daughter Nzinga, who recovered from COVID pretty early in the pandemic, and for the most part did not leave the house until the protests of 2020 began. What I saw from her and her friends wasn't about acts of defiance or finding their voices, but rather this feeling of finally being heard. It was a feeling of relief. Listened to and cared for by a world whose usual response to her has been, stop being so loud, don't be so angry, smile, work harder, do more, don't be so lazy. So what does it mean to feel listened to, cared for, seen as the person you are, as you have defined yourself to be? This got me thinking about our front stoop as a site of self-definition. This place that so many of us use for congregation with neighbors and family and friends, a threshold from where you enter and exit the world that understands you and the world that may disparage you. I have enjoyed reunions with old friends, ran from sexual predators to cross this threshold into safety, and witnessed my own child, my son, pinned down and choked out by the NYPD for a cell phone bulge in his pocket as he tried to cross the threshold of this stoop. This is this very stoop. Next slide. Drawing these figures in comparison to the Mycenaean figurines, I thought a lot about our stoop as a stage, and remembered visiting New Orleans after Katrina and seeing a bare stoop at where a home once stood. The stoop led to nothing. It was gone, the home was gone. The threshold only led back to itself. And so I thought to myself, in these drawings, our stoop would lead to a warm glow in a blue night. That I would capture the figure's kindness and playful dispositions without the lens of the outside world. Next slide. With this drawing, I thought a lot about the years of harassment my daughter had gone through in school settings when it came to her body, including her hair, and I wanted to celebrate how well she had navigated her defiance. She had just let me braid her hair for the first time in many years, because of COVID, everything was closed. So I got to braid her hair. And I then chose to adorn the braids with these raised fist hairpins that I made many years ago that were inspired by Afro picks that I still wear to this day. I have one right here for you guys to see. Next slide. And Crack House, White House, who doesn't love a good poster that tells the truth? There's really not much. It's hard for me to say anything about this, only because I think it says it all, really. There's no follow-up to that. Next slide. With this drawing, I thought it would be nice to illustrate the process of making stenciled posters. The closest figure in the foreground is drawing the poster text image. The middle ground figure is cutting the stencil, and the figure in the far background, which is over to the left, is spray painting the stencils to make the posters. For me, art is often thought of something that is made in solitude, but in my experience, art is best made in community. Whether it's sewing circles or songwriting or printmaking, there's something really special about visioning and following through on that vision in community with others. So I really wanted to make sure that I included that type of that type of, I guess, drawing or place in the process of art making. And that is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elisa. We're gonna hand it over to Cecilia to think a little bit more about some of the ideas that were just introduced, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Oisa, and thanks, Kirsten. So for this next activity, it's really about looking at an object and seeing possibilities that go beyond and deeper than what we see at first glance. We'll look at 3 pieces from the John Gray Selects exhibition, adding elements from each piece to create a completely new combined object. So if you've ever heard of an exquisite corpse, it's a similar concept. So taking pieces from each object to create a new object. So if you haven't already, go grab a piece of paper and a pen and a pencil, and we'll get started. Also, don't worry if you're not good at drawing, if you're not really artistic in the traditional sense. It's more about the concept rather than a perfect composition.
And could you all type ready into the chat when you've got something to draw with or write with, and maybe something to draw on? Benjamin's ready. Love it. Kim is ready.
Kim's ready.
Oh, we're all ready.
Awesome.
Let's go.
Awesome. All right, so let's start sketching. To start, we're going to focus on one aspect of this object. And Oisa, I remember when we were discussing this, you had such a great prompt that you use with your students when doing an activity like this.
Yeah, usually when I do an activity like this, I'll ask them to find a shape, a texture, or some other sort of detail about the object that they really want to remember, that looks special to them, and let that be the focus of their drawing.
Awesome.
We'll
start with this one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we're going to be starting with this one, and then we'll be combining them. So you don't have to draw the whole thing, right, Cecilia?
No, just one aspect of it.
Got it. So I'm going to put this up for about 3 minutes, and we'll play some music until we move to the next one. All right, are you ready for the next one?
I think so. So this is the second object that we will be taking aspects from and adding it to our original drawing. So see if you can combine one aspect of this to what you've already drawn. And remember, you're creating a new combined object.
Great, a few more seconds with this one.
All right, so now we're on to our final object. And as you're creating this new combined object, remember that it can be as fantastic or as realistic as you would want it to be. You can be creating a functional object like a machine or a tool, or it can be something completely the opposite, never before seen. So really allow yourself to expand all possibilities. All right. So now we have this brand new object. It might look kind of strange, or it might look maybe beautiful. Maybe it looks completely out of this world. And I want you guys to imagine that you're 50 years into the future, and there's a communal, societal, or global problem that has been addressed thanks to this object that you've created. This could be any issue that you feel really strongly about or that you care about. Think about, how did this object make an impact? And really think outside the box, really create a narrative that really kind of pushes the limits of maybe logic. So think about your object, meditate on it, meditate on how it has impacted the world 50 years from now, and jot down your ideas. Do it through poem or prose, or just bullet points of words that resonate, however you want to express your ideas.
We'll have about 3 to 5 minutes of writing. Let's say 4 more minutes of writing.
Sounds good. All right, so now that we've had some time to really think about our objects, it's time to share. So please share in the chat. Is there a narrative or story that has emerged from this process? What story did this object inspire? Share any ideas in the chat, or if you'd like to share with the group, you can raise your hand. Oasa, I saw, were you drawing a little bit? Would you like to share? Kick us off?
Sure. I don't know that it actually became anything, but it ended up kind of being a face.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if it'll solve any world problems or other issues. I did think a lot about I have a relative that's very close to me that's vision impaired, and they've been vision impaired their whole life. And when I was a child, they got a glass eye, and we thought that they'd finally be able to see well, but it turned out those glass eyes, they're just purely cosmetic. So I'd like to imagine a future where they actually enhance vision.
Wait, that's awesome. I love that. You really did kind of create this like overarching narrative in an unexpected way. Could you hold up your drawing again? I just want to take one more look. Yeah, I can see the face. It's awesome.
I'm seeing in the chat, someone has created a symbol that will be used to ID companies that spy on their remote employees. So maybe potentially thinking about personal circumstances. Alexa's is very pattern and symbol oriented, and imagines it to be complex, not even discovered yet, a new kind of coding. It's really
cool.
Interesting. And then I was seeing something that says, everyone looks the same when you're blind. I drew a pair of glasses with the lenses obscured by art. A view of discord, how can we connect, how to bring us together, a new device that allows you to see through someone else's lens. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing those. I have one as well. Oh, Kim has used numbers from the first two objects and the patterns from the last textile, which made her think of math across all three. I imagine that World War III broke out due to not finding global commonality. Then this object was found and they realized that we have math in common.
Wow.
And Zachary says, I see what will be seen, but not yet seen. What will be used to see all the dreams and possibilities that once excited and all those that are yet to be fulfilled. So I'm seeing a lot about I think potentially because of the opera glasses in the first and the telephone in the second, thinking a lot about seeing, hearing, and connecting.
Mm-hmm.
And Angelica writes, a communication device that allows you to see and hear the people from communities lost due to climate change and global warming, even if they are no longer there.
That's really beautiful.
So I would love to, zoom out a little bit. These were really beautiful stories and ideas that were just shared, and just talk a little bit about what the value is in telling a new story or rewriting the narrative, whether that's for ourselves or for our students or just for the future in general.
I just have to say, what I find really valuable in an activity like this is you can't really foresee what the end product will look like. Mm-hmm. But I really appreciate how everyone just kind of rolled with it and really allowed themselves to kind of like let go and experience that uncertainty in real time. I think it allows for creative thinking, and that goes beyond just creative expression, like a work of art. It kind of allows for creative thinking in terms of connection and solving problems and new ways of seeing things.
Amazing. And there's some really wonderful things in the chat. Carol says the value is in innovation. We certainly did that today. We need to tell a collaborative story rather than competing stories. Other stories and perspectives matter and must be included in the story of all. Speculation and imagination is the beginning of creation. New stories equal new possibilities. And that just very logistically speaking, but very importantly, that this might be a tool to help students develop their individual artistic voice through storytelling. And synthesizing knowledge to project into the future. Absolutely. This makes me think a little bit about this idea that we talk a lot about design at Cooper Hewitt, and we talk about how designers don't necessarily see the world as it is, but as it could be, and how important that knowledge is and will especially be in the future, where there's all these adaptive problems and things that we need to kind of come together on. So I want to make space for anything else. Does anyone else have additional thoughts to close this out? Elisa, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you know, do you have thoughts on this in general? I know you kind of have been through it.
Yeah, I think as an artist, I'm constantly searching for ways to retell a story, either ones that already exist or ones that are within me, and also finding ways to connect the personal and with the social and political. I think oftentimes we're told to keep those things separate, but in fact the political is very personal. Our society is really like, it dictates a lot of our experiences. Whether or not we want to acknowledge it is a different story, but I think how we interact with each other determines a lot about how we see ourselves in the world, and vice versa. So yeah, I think just in my own artistic practice, I'm always looking for ways to retell old stories, but also bring in new ideas to them.
Amazing. Yeah, and I saw a lot of kind of old ideas brought to life again, but in completely new ways in a lot of the stories in the chat too. So, I know we have educators in the audience who might be thinking about not only the value in an exercise like this and the value of speculative storytelling in general like this for their students. So I wanted to turn it over to my colleague Adriana, who along with Oisa has developed some amazing tools in Smithsonian Learning Lab. And for those that might not be familiar, Smithsonian Learning Lab is a place where all Smithsonian collections, resources come together and can be a place where you can get ideas for lessons. You can do some amazing research on Learning Lab, and it's just a wonderful one-stop shop for a lot of wonderful classroom resources, and many of which have been created by Adriana. So if it's okay, Adriana, I will hand it over to you.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Kirsten. Also, just before I start, just a huge team to the education team in general for helping to really create this resource. It wasn't just me, it was everyone on the team, really. So a big thank you. But we started this project last year, and we had no idea what it would look like, but we are incredibly interested in creating a resource inspired by the Selects exhibition and its Afrofuturist narrative. The collections normally introduce users to design stories and to Cooper's collection, but we did recognize the need to kind of expand the stories that we tell through these resources and the collaborators behind the scenes developing these interpretive materials as well. So we wanted to create a framework with multi-layered conversations that could work in tandem with curricula, but one that we also hope students would find relevant and engaging and challenging as well. Again, the Selects exhibition presented a really unique opportunity to open up and be open about the pieces in our collections and encourage students to explore different ways of connecting creatively and critically and responding to the object that they might encounter, whether that be in a museum, in our museum, in another institution, or really even to the different objects, monuments, things around them that they are encountering on a daily basis. So each of OASIS drawings have a dedicated Learning Lab collection. There are 5 in total, where we introduce the object that inspired her work and the history of that object. Then we introduce the featured drawing and the context behind that drawing, and we frame it as a way of how students can see these objects as jumping off points for this creative imagining and speculative thinking. We then present a series of points for reflection and discussion, along with additional images, some from Cooper Hewitt's collection, some outside of Cooper Hewitt's collection, but just different ways of also thinking of these ideas. So inspired by research from our team, and also again from the personal stories from Oasa that she shared with us about her own experiences as a student, and those of her children and their friends as young Black teens, especially during last year and this previous year. We really wanted to use these points to prompt students to think of what it means to see, what it means to be seen, what it means to feel empowered, what it means to change your perspective, what it means to care for yourself and care for your community, and a lot of other different ideas in these collections as well. At the end of each collection, we have a summary, and then we prompt students to do the same thing that Oasa did, right? So how can you take these objects that might have difficult histories, difficult stories, that you might not be able to see yourself using or being included in that narrative, but then how can you learn about it and then really use that as a jumping off point to spark your own imagination, to create your own creative response as well. So we wanted to think of, what stories can students tell that are inspired by these objects, and what new connections can they forge, just like many of you did today. So for example, a little while ago, I looked at the opera glasses, again, just like many of you did today, and I thought about a new way of kind of looking at those objects. So instead of seeing them as what they were previously used for, so markers of wealth and status, to show your wealth, to show that you could actually attend a performance like an opera, I kind of transformed them into a tool of communication. So it could be either like a ring of sorts or like an earplug of sorts. I know it's difficult to see, but just a device, a wearable device that would really enhance communication and kind of help us to understand what others are thinking, what others are saying, even if they're not really able to kind of communicate all that they're thinking. So again, a different way of thinking of what it means to see and what it means to be heard and to be seen as well. So all in all, we've really enjoyed working on this project, and in particular, it's been amazing and incredibly inspiring to see voice drawings taking shape. I really hope that you will take these collections and find them useful, and we hope that you'll share them with your students as well. And we're excited to continue building new collections like this in this new creative, imaginative, and collaborative way. And Kirsten is going through a few of the collections that we have. Again, there are 5 in total, so we definitely hope that you will take a look through them, read through them, share them with your students, and then kind of share your feedback with us. We also have a hashtag at the end of each collection as well, where we encourage students to actually post their creative responses, their designs to our Twitter page as well. So we hope to see some of those designs coming in as well.
Thank you so much, Adriana. I'm so excited to put these in front of people, and really grateful for you and Oasa for making this happen. And we hope that you'll be able to use these with your students. We went through them, but there's 5 of them. This last one is activism in action, and Cecilia's put them all in the chat. Oh, I see them now. I think there were some issues with the links, but
yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. But please, if you have any questions, feel free to be in touch with us. I will put my email in the chat, and we would love to hear from you about how you're using these learning labs with your students. So we hope to hear from you and see you soon. So thank you all so much.